Welcome to the Starting Over Podcast. I'm your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is the show where we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of heroclix. Today's show is going to be interesting. I'm going to pretty much call it like Experiment 5902 or something like that, because I've been playing around with the set and, well, with Batman the Anime series over the last few weeks, and having to take a break too because of the 3 days of super competition in Omaha, Nebraska, which I recorded a show after that, and it was 30 minutes, and it just wasn't a good show, and I really haven't had any ideas since then. So I've been on the low. So I apologize for lack of content. It's just when you're burnt, and it's not worth putting out content while you're burnt out. Yeah. So let's sort of get into today's episode. What are we going to look at? I'm going to sort of take the time to approach and look at the call-in mechanic by the Batman animated series chases with their whole trouble alert. And I'm going to compound what I've learned from trouble alert and to try to help you all have a better understanding of what these chases really mean for the game in the long run versus what they're meaning right now. And I think adjusting our expectations is going to be the really big factor. So, first off, I like to point out that this mechanic is not bad. The problem with this mechanic is as follows. If you can't, let me rephrase that. It's not the problem. Let's sort of look at our expectations in a little bit. The idea is for us to bring in a character. That character is going to proceed and do something for our team. They're coming in at a low point value, but they are still a point liability, and many times they come in with what I would like to call a support power. And that support power allows them to do various different things depending on the situation. Alright, now, I'll be honest, out of all of them, there's only 2 or 3 that are really offensive, and those offensive ones I don't think most people want to play, sadly. But that's just my viewpoint. And sort of to put it like more bluntly, the ones that are the least favored, yeah, like that's the best way to put it, I think, are the ones that actually potentially could be the most aggressive. Aquaman definitely is one. If you're in a close combat situation, you can just drop him nearby and he can mind control. Superman is another one with charge, super strength, 3 damage. The Wonder Woman, charge, 10 attack, 3 damage. The Atom, charge, super strength, 2 damage. And even Apache Chief. Nobody really likes them, which is a little bit sad, because definitely Apache Chief has potential. After 1 free Nunchuck, now he has Giant Reach 2, and he can see several characters, and he can just be like, yeah, Quake, son. So and in some cases, if he single targets Quakes and hits, he's going to hit plus knockback. So he's going to do 3 damage plus knockback. So I can't slack on Apache Chief, but yeah. Also, my side note, like, you might be saying, like, well, why am I not including, like, Hawkgirl in this? And Hawkman. Hawkman is a bit too cumbersome. Hawkgirl isn't bad. The only problem is that Hawkgirl really I feel like she's too much of a utility. And you're trying to bring in that bird, and the bird's autonomous, and I think that the bird has more uses than Hawk Girl, and we're going to get into that now. So the lesson I've learned from playing with Autonomous this last week, or not Autonomous, the Trouble Alert this last week, is this. There are two main things that if you're looking to maximize the call-in for your Trouble Alert character, you need to have one of the two. A, you need to have leadership. And I just think overall in the game right now, I think leadership has just become one of those like mandatory powers, which really elevates the whole concept of stop, and pretty much breaks it, because now leadership is added in there, which is a good thing, because leadership for, I would say, over half of the lifespan of the game was pretty much almost a useless power. A chance to get plus actions, and then, we can remove tokens, that's great, but for most people, the 50% chance classically to get an action was the main thing that you were running leadership for, and if it failed, your team failed, or it went off when like your entire team is token and you couldn't maximize it. So, but the main reason I say is you want leadership is because you have to fail 3 times before you bring one of these characters in, and fail your attack 3 times. And so unless you are packing Flurry, which is a lot easier with the Walking Woods, and there's more Flurry-ish like characters on the cosmic scale, like Star Fox and Tigra, or pretty much the Avengers Infinity chases, you really don't want those characters to miss. And I'm sorry, with Star Fox, if Star Fox is missing with a 14 or 13 attack, you're just doing something wrong. You just are. Like, that's pretty much almost auto hit territory, or pretty much God has foretold that you will not hit. And so pretty much I look at that situation of with our flurries that we have in place as being pretty good, but then building teams around Flurry is very, very restrictive. So I wouldn't put Flurry into one of those main categories of powers that you need to have, but having leadership it's really important, because let's just say you just do nothing but attacks. You whiff attack 1, whiff attack 2, whiff attack 3. Now you're like, oh, okay, cool, I can summon in Green Lantern. Boom, you summon in Green Lantern. Now, what is Green Lantern going to do? You summon in Batman. What is Batman going to do? He's going to outwit something and be in stealth? Cool. Possibly be in stealth, depending on where you're at. And then you're saying to yourself, well, he could potentially hit or do something, but since I'm out of actions, he can't do jack. And that really is the first main problem that I noticed, is if you only have 3 actions, bringing in one of these characters is too much of a liability for you. At least in my opinion, because you're definitely looking at a situation where, since they're so short dialed and their defenses are average to mediocre, you're just giving your opponent free points. So let's, for example, go back and look at Hawk Girl at low click, at her Trouble Alert dial. She comes in with 16 defense super senses. Apache Chief, he's pretty nice. He comes in with an 18 defense toughness. Green Lantern, on the other hand, very average, 17 defense and barrier. Okay, so what are we noticing? Like, again, there's some characters that have a higher defense, but they're more aggressive. Wonder Woman, again, 17 defense, toughness. Superman, 17 defense, toughness. Yeah, so I think Apache Chief is probably the only one with a high defense. Yeah. So everybody else has pretty much average or below average defense. So they're easy to take out, and 3 damage is standard. So getting an outwit for your opponent or some sort of penetrating damage or whatever, that's not necessarily a problem. So by not having enough actions, you put yourself in a hugely bad situation where you've just given your opponent, 20 to 30 points, and you just create a huge liability for yourself. So again, you start to ask yourself the following question. If I miss 3 times in a row, and I'm specifically sticking with the missing 3 times in a row versus the crit miss for a particular reason, because number one, you have a higher chance of missing 3 times than you do crit missing, unless there are was it heroclix or whatever, or a few other specific characters that make just missing certain numbers and hitting certain numbers crit misses, which I'll touch on that in a little while. All right. So again, if you miss 3 times, the amount of actions that you've eaten up is a lot. So you're functionally doing like a sacrifice mechanic from Yu-Gi-Oh. You sacrifice 3 attacks, fortunately not 3 characters, to bring in this micro utility. So, again, leadership is the one of the main things that you need to be looking at. B, autonomous. Oh gosh, I did not think how broken autonomous could be until after these last few weekends. I'll say this. Autonomous is a good step forward for minions and pogs. My problem is I feel like you can't you have to make it so they can't have their stats manipulated. I think that has to be the balance for autonomous, because it goes back to, for a long time listeners, you'll remember me pretty much saying during the War of Light era and pretty much the Ghost Rider era was WizKid's problem is free attacks. Like the heroclix problem at that time was there were just too many free actions. Like you got to attack for free, you got to get in a position for free, you got to pick a power for free or 2 powers for free, and there was just so many free actions that you got to do that it was absurd, and it made costed actions too much of a liability. And the good thing is that we've moved away from that model mostly. Okay, but now we're back at it in a different way. And that different way is, hey, I create an autonomous pog. That pog is mediocre. And it just makes attacks. Now, again, I'll rant a little bit more on autonomous later. But functionally, by having the mediocre stats, and I'll take, for example, Average Bird that Hawk Girl summons, which sort of doubles down on my whole point about attacks. So Average Bird is actually autonomous. It's not Standard Fist, to my knowledge. It's actually autonomous. And so Average Bird can flurry. So all you do is perplex down Average Bird's attack to an 8 and have it flurry, and your following turn and boom, like, yeah, you're already up 2 misses, and it didn't impact your action pool. Same thing goes with the Maxi Zeus. Like, I actually think Maxi Zeus is probably going to be the sleeper meta character. And I know some of you are going to be like, well, why is that, Dark Logos? And it's like, it's sort of simple. If you're able to have 2 Maxi Zeuses, you're able to create 4 turrets. And if you're able to get up on elevated, you're able to make 4 turrets in 1 turn. That's 4 attacks with potentially 1 to 2 enhancements behind each of them, giving you a 10 attack, 4 damage, multiple times for free. Now, I know some of you might say, again, like, I paid 40 points for Maxi Zeus. And I'm like, yeah, you paid 40 points for Maxi Zeus. Total 80 point investment. But for 80 point investment, I got 4 attacks off at 10 attack, 2 damage, 6 range. Like, no. That's stupid. Now, there's other ways of, like, even going further and modifying your attack and whatnot for the Stone Harpies. But for all intents and purposes, that's 80 points for 4 attacks for free. I think that's a problem. I really do think that's a problem. Now, you might also be wondering, like, do I think the same of whatchamacallit, of like Zatanna's bats? Like, Zatanna's bats is another thing that's stupid, and they also have autonomous. Yeah, they're stupid. They shouldn't exist. Like, she needs to be toned down a bit. But having played a team with 2 Zatannas and a Maxi Zeus, it can get stupid, the amount of damage that autonomous can go out. But again, I'm going to get into that later. So, it's 4 attacks. Like, with 2 Maxi Zeuses, that's 4 attacks. Okay? And if I miss 3 of those 4 attacks, what did that really cost me from my action pool? Nothing. Now I summon in, let's just say hypothetically, I summon in Firestorm. Okay? So I summon in Firestorm, and he has Sidestep, he has Energy Explosion, and then he has Prob. Well, cool. I could have just been saving up all my Prob, my Perplexes, and everything else to make him, my call-in Kamehameha. Now, as stupid as that sounds, it's an option. You could say, like, well, but hey, Dark Logos, he also has Energy Explosion. Wouldn't you also think about that? I'm like, yeah, you could. Because if you have a bunch of characters based to each other, you could just be like, hey, yeah, I'm going to Energy Explosion here and here. And, yeah, I just killed, like, a bunch of your Pogs. Or I just dealt 2 damage to most of your team. All right, great. He's pretty much done his job. Even if he clicks down, he's done his job. So, again, autonomous is another element. Now, I will also note that not all autonomous characters are created equal. Okay? And that's a key thing. Not all autonomous characters are created equal. So, for example, the bats. The bats can't attack. Alright, so they don't do you any good whatsoever. The bats, they can get in position, but, like, again, they don't do jack. Alright. I don't think Ubu is autonomous. I never pulled a Ra's al Ghul, so I can't confirm or deny that he's autonomous. Pheromone Mushroom. You have a range of 4 with your mind control. Now, with Pheromone Mushroom, I'm more concerned about is, I think the new Wolverine ID is that you bring it in, you bring in the Pheromone Mushroom, call in the Wolverine ID. Now the mushroom can Blaze Claw's fangs with a 10 attack. I know it's not optimal, it's just an idea. It's just an idea, people. But the Pheromone Mushrooms, if it wasn't for the fact that Poison Ivy sort of sucked and really didn't have that much utility, I think the Pheromone Mushroom is probably the more deadlier of the options out there, because you're forcing your opponent to move from areas that in all reality they may not want to move from, with the risk of either being mind controlled, with the risk of being mind controlled, with a very reasonable attack. Not the best attack, not the not the top of the top attack, but for a free attack, a 10 attack is very good. So again, the only problem with the pheromone mushroom is, again, it's got mind control and 0 range, so it's only got a 4 range that it can affect people at, and it can't see through stealth, so it only can affect people which it has a direct line of fire to. So you could say, right now, Dark Logos, I don't think Autonomous is that deadly, and I would say, you could flip a coin. But when we look at it being combined with the Trouble Alert, it's really good. So, like the pheromone mushroom, I hate to say it, is if that poison ivy didn't suck, it would actually be more threatening than the gargoyles. But anyway, as it stands right now, Maxi Zeus presents a huge advantage in terms of getting your Trouble Alert characters out. And then you can follow that up with Average Bird from Hawk Girl. But when we start looking at these like missed attacks, it's huge, because with Autonomous we're not losing our action pool, and by not losing our action pool, we're able to potentially act with the character that we summoned in, plus do everything else that we planned this turn. And so I just find that interesting. So what's the sort of the final verdict on Trouble Alert? And I would say is, as it is right now, swarm teams that maximize leadership have the best chance of utilizing Trouble Alert effectively. And I know I said I was going to talk on the crit miss thing. The reason crit miss is such a big deal is that if you have a character like Alopex are now a liability against somebody that has a lot of Trouble Alert. Definitely in situations where there's like no ID cards, Alopex becomes a huge liability. So let me read what Alopex says. When Alopex hits an opposing character, give them a curse token. Characters with one or more curse tokens modify attack by -1. So automatically right there, you're summoning guys in. And attacks made by those characters that misses all targets becomes a critical miss. So anybody that single targets attacks, it's pretty much has a good chance of critical missing. So here's the problem. Alopex has a high chance of if you have 2 or 3 of the Trouble Alert characters on the sideline, guess what? You're easily able to get all of them in. Now, no, you're going to take an unavoidable for crit missing. That's fine. But you're bringing in additional force, and to the point where it can go up. I feel it can go up. You're going to add an additional 100 points to your force easy, depending on your sideboard. So, like, characters like Alopex now are functionally out of the metasphere before it even got a chance to take off, just because of Trouble Alert. Any other characters that cause characters to crit miss? And let me just see. Let's just go ahead and throw it into the old HC realms and see what comes up when we type in the phrase crit miss, when we search for all special powers, and we'll just do modern age. Okay, so alright, here we go. Alright, so we got Quasar. Once per turn, when Quasar's attack has a 6, turns double. Okay, this turn double ones is not a crit miss, and whenever a friendly character crit hits, increase the damage dealt by 2 instead of 1. So, alright, so Quasar sort of gets us around that. Mr. Spock, what do you do? 4 squares. Can't be re-rolled. Makes okay. Here we go. Mr. Spock, Star Trek HeroClix Away Team, the original series, number 27. It's the most logical course of action, the probability of success being approximately 83.3%. Free. Choose a friendly character within 4 squares in line of fire. The next attack roll that character makes this turn can't be re-rolled on a result 2 through 4. The attack is a critical miss. On a 5 through 12, the result of the attack roll is 7. Now, some of you might say, this is bad. But for Trouble Alert, this could actually mean you're in a no-lose situation. So this Mr. Spock has gone up in value. Because either A, you're rolling a 7, which is on average, or B, you're crit missing, and you're summoning in a Trouble Alert character. Okay, so right there, you're winning. Okay, so all right, so let's go back. Let's look at this Dr. McCoy. Choose a friendly character within 4 squares in line of fire. Yeah. To hell with your logic, Mr. Spock. Sometimes man just has to follow his gut. Yeah. Here we go. But no, never mind. The 2 through 9 thing is it just says that it's still a crit miss if it's a crit miss. Okay, but yeah, so never mind. So Dr. McCoy doesn't really help us. Mr. Spock is actually gone up in value. Alopex has gone down in value. Which is sort of surprising because I didn't think that this Mr. Spock actually could be a tide changer. He has that United Federation of Planets, which I think is pretty much Avengers. Sidestep, 11 attack, precision strike, energy shield deflection enhancement, 6 range, so he's okay. But that trait is actually pretty good because, like I said, either you're going to hit or you're going to summon in a you're going to summon in a Trouble Alert character. But the crit miss element, I think, if you keep building on the fact like, hey, I'm forcing you to crit miss, I think that it has the potential to backfire on a person. So like I said, Alopex is a problem. And I wish that it wasn't the case because I had really high hopes for him. So let's sort of keep moving on back to my little bit of my gripe a bit more with autonomous and sort of explaining why I feel like they shouldn't be stat manipulated. Again, you're getting these attacks for free, or you're getting their movement or actions or whatever they're doing for free. And because they're for free, I know that game design, as of right now, has autonomous characters with mediocre stats. So it's like 10 attack. I don't think there's any damage above 2. But once I start going into, force-wide buffs, and I know we don't care about Golden Age in terms of WizKid's perspective, but when you start looking at global buffs, that's when things become a little bit silly about what autonomous characters can do and what friendly characters can do. If you have friendly characters get +1 attack if so-and-so is within 3 squares of an opposing character. So-and-so, if so-and-so hits this turn, all friendly characters do +1 damage. If so-and-so hits and is a first attack, all friendly characters modify range by +1. Like, all these little effects stack and can make autonomous really, really, really strong. So I know in the future there's going to be a Kitty Pryde with Lockheed, and Lockheed is going to be autonomous. I know it's coming. It's self-evident. I know there's going to be like somebody that has like a robot pal, and that robot pal is going to be autonomous. And my concern is that what we previously had with standard characters and Pogs, and the Pogs taking up actions, which was the cost benefit of the Pogs being free or generated for free, is now going to be looked at as a bad thing. That if you generate a Pog and it's not autonomous, then it's less than a character that may not be as good functionally on their dial, that generates a worse Pog but does it for free. And so I think that is the problem that we're going to be seeing here in the future, is that once everybody gets that taste of autonomous in their mouth, it's going to be like cocaine sugar. Like, once folks really start playing with it. Now, I know some people will say, it's like autonomous, they don't have a bunch of cool powers in autonomous. Like, autonomous characters are really mediocre and not power rich, like most Pogs are. Yes. And that is the only thing keeping them in balance right now. The fact that autonomous Pogs versus standard bystander Pogs are not power rich right now needs to be a requirement from game design going forward. That an autonomous character, and again, like I said, it's like I feel like they shouldn't be buffed, but an autonomous character cannot have more than one power. Because I'm concerned, and more importantly, they cannot have a damage power. They cannot have a damage power. I'm fine with autonomous characters generating smoke cloud, or hell, I really wouldn't want them to do barrier. I really wouldn't want them to do barrier because I feel like that would be too strong. But I would be sort of okay with barrier if the character that generated the Pogs was over 100 points. But yeah, like, I just look at that situation of, if, like, let's just say the gargoyles. If the gargoyles had Force Blast and invulnerability, or it had Range Combat Expert and invulnerability, or if it had Psychic Blast and invulnerability, like think about that. Like, how stupid would those gargoyles be? You would want them to have a costed action. And I think that's really what we're going to start looking at, is, can WizKids justify that the attack is free when a lot of other characters are as stat rich as the Pog, as the autonomous Pog, but you have to pay to do their action, versus the autonomous character that doesn't. So, like I said, like, there's some concerns when I look at that. Like I said, number one, the buffing, and number two is just make sure that they never get stat rich, and number three is start measuring bystanders against themselves, and number four, lastly, is you're paying to do a costed action with one character with the same stats as an autonomous character. So why would I ever use that character, which I paid a costed I pay a costed action for? So does that, like, eliminate, like, moloids because average bird exists? No, it doesn't, because there's other uses for characters like that. But it does raise a question of, at any point in time that I was thinking about doing something with a moloid, and you can just say insert cheapo guy here that has crap attack and damage, like Tyrannoids or something like that. if I was ever thinking of doing something with them, I'm now sort of held up because an autonomous character is just better. So when I'm looking through my cost-benefit analysis, like autonomous starts going up there. Now, I won't say that I'm done fooling around with autonomous, because I think going forward, we're probably going to see maybe 2 more sets utilize it before they like put it on pause and like look at the damage that was done. And they'll be Marvel sets. But I really want to see what game design's mindset is when they view the concept of this should be free. And I really want to ask them this, because when we go back to that whole problem of free attacks, tons of free actions, free, you start having to introduce characters and mechanics that punish free actions. And then if you are a person not utilizing or playing the free type metagame, then you are hyper oppressed by, this new control piece, because you're playing, just standard heroclix or kitchen sink heroclix. So, like I said, I think there's a problem, from a game design perspective that we definitely have to look at. Now, so overall, Trouble Alert and in Autonomous, I think those huge shifts to the game from the Batman set, I think that we're not done learning the lessons from them. I think there's going to be other players out there that are really talented that are going to show us something broken. And once that happens, I think, unfortunately, game design might be too far behind before it gets fixed. So I don't think anything major is going to show up at Worlds, but by US Nats next year, there's bound to be something that's broken. So let's go in and sort of unpack some lessons I learned from a full weekend of playing HeroClix in Omaha. And I like to give a shout out again to Sparta Games and Krypton Comics. Krypton Comics hosted the Rock event, and they also hosted one of the WKOs, and Sparta Games hosted the other WKO on Friday night. And I also give them shout outs to Sparta Games for actually hosting an event on a Friday night, in which potentially they could have lost money in that situation. And so I definitely give them a shout outs for that. So let's sort of look at the first thing I learned. The first thing that I learned was just make sure you're aware of when the event starts, how long it takes for you to get there. If it takes you 5 hours to get to the venue, and like that's what the trip is on a Friday, are you taking, a full day of work off? Are you taking half day of work off? Like, are you going to eat on the way down? Are you going to eat there? Like what's the deal? Know that ahead of time so that everybody's on the same page. Don't stress. Just don't stress. If the trip's 2 hours and the event's at 7, then it's best for you to leave around 4. But don't try to pack in a bunch of other different, like, what if, like, just try to give yourself a little bit of buffer, but don't stress out completely over that buffer. The next thing that I would tell you is that if you're on like a 3 or more day tournament or series of tournaments, be very forgiving with those around you. Just understand that you all are going through high stress situations, and brevity and snark are easier things to hand out than well thought out arguments or conversation or a bit of kindness. So the best thing I would tell most folks, if you're with your friends, just eat some of your comments. Like, don't, like take a second and stop and pause and ask yourself, if someone said that to me right now, how would I feel? Versus, I just want to, give this dude a verbal lashing because I'm stressed. And again, we don't realize it. We don't have time. We don't internalize it like that. But that's really what's going on. The next thing is, in a tournament environment, if a player is a newer player to competitive, or is coming in and they play at their local venue, but then they're this is like their first big event, give them the advice after the round is over. Give them the advice and the clues and all this other stuff after the round is over. I found that was more beneficial to me. Definitely when I was talking to this one young kid, and he was playing and during the sealed game on Sunday, he had Batman Beyond, and he should have just killed my entire team. But he didn't, because he picked a bad map. And I waited until after the game to explain to him, because the kid gives you sort of the wimpy handshake, and he's got the dog eyes, the puppy dog eyes, and you're like, oh. But I realized that if I said something at the beginning, that he really wouldn't have learned the lesson, that he had to experience the loss to learn the lesson. Is, know what map works best for you and why, and what map works best for your opponent and why. It's a simple lesson, but again, he's a kid. But any other player that you're dealing with, whether it's an adult or not, give them advice afterward. And there was one game when I was in top 8 on Friday that I told my opponent something I shouldn't have told him, in terms of trying to hurry the game. But because of that, I end up giving him information that allowed me to lose the game. So you have to sort of keep in mind while you're there. And I know some folks will be like, but Dark Logos, shouldn't you be able to be such a fortitude of player that you can overcome any sort of situation while giving them help? No, you can't. And I will say that mainly because of the way the game is now. If anyone is playing any sort of competent team, the game can shift really easily now out of your advantage. Whereas before, if you got the ball rolling, it's really hard for it to stop because your opponent has crap stats. Now, if your opponent's figure is still on the field, or there's several figures on the field, there is a high chance for comebacks to happen. There's really a high chance for comebacks to happen. And so you have to keep that in mind. You really do have to keep that in mind. Definitely consider, like I said, you're traveling to go to this event. You're not just going down the road. The next thing I would tell you is get your food plans straightened out ahead of time in terms of places that you want to go and what your backups are. Because there's places that are better to eat. And this is just more of me, Dark Logos, man about town type of thing. But I go out and I eat at various places in my local community. I try to go to, the foodie places and try them out. I look at that as like me treating myself now and then. But when I go out of town, I try not to experiment too hard. I usually go to higher ranked food establishments, places that have 3-4 star ratings on Google. And the main, 5 stars too, if it's in the right price category. But the main reason that I do that is that I know I'm going to experience a good meal while I'm there. And I know some folks are, you're like, hey, I'm on that Burger King budget. I'm not balling right now. that's cool. Just sort of take this as a a lesson later. And I'm not saying that that's the only place that you can eat, but when it's dinner time, eat at some place that's nice. Don't just put another hot pocket in your mouth. Like, go find a decent restaurant to get you some core nutritional ingredients, because you've burned some calories during that day doing this game. And not only that, your mind needs a certain amount of serotonin and dopamine back. And you're only going to really generate that by eating. So, and if you eat some good food, you can get some, core nutrients and vitamins and minerals and other stuff into you. But most importantly, you're able to find a place that is able to accommodate the general size of your group. And not only that, you can get any of the I don't like to eat this, I don't like to eat that, the wait's too long stuff out of the way. Because if you're able to have 2 to 3 restaurants that you're willing to go to in a certain area, then you know that ahead of time. Oh, well, the line's too long here, let's just go to restaurant 2. Oh, the line's too long at restaurant 2, let's go to restaurant 3. Just try to have those things set, and think about those ahead of time. Lastly, I would say, is sort of keep track of your stuff. Try to look out for your friends' stuff. Shout out to my boy Lucas. He caught my guffaw. I left a lot of stuff in Omaha, and he has my Phoenix Nest dice and my Phoenix Nest tokens, and a bunch of my figures. So he caught that for me. So look out for other people's stuff. If this is where our community table is with all our maps and stuff, just keep an eye out. I'm not saying that folks are going to steal. That does happen, but you want to just make sure that you have everything, and that your group has everything, that they're not leaving things behind. So that's pretty much my lessons I've learned from this trip. And normally I record, but I didn't have a lot of space, and because I didn't have a lot of space in my luggage, I couldn't pack my camera. So that was I also won't lie. I don't think it probably would have been the best thing for me to record this that weekend either. Just mainly because it's a couple other side things that happen. But I would definitely encourage you to go over to Happy Little HeroClix channel. Check out the games that are listed there, and you'll see some of the people from Kansas City doing really well. And there's some interesting little side text there that you can also check out. So that's pretty much it for today's episode. Just sort of looking at the game the way it is now, I'm not in a oh my gosh, WizKids, y'all suck. I'm also not hallelujah, the promised land is here. But I do think things are getting better. I think things in the community are getting slightly better. I think the question really that we're going to have to start asking ourselves is, for our ecosystem of the game, how many tournaments can we hold in a year that gets us reasonable amounts of attendance? And I'm seeing this in part from watching Evo, but also looking at how many tournaments WizKids has put out from the WKOs, how many rocks have been going on, and local events, and then summer events with the sort of summerish events with the Days of Futures Past ID cards and all this other stuff. There's legit questions that have to be asked. and I think the biggest one is how much do you need to travel as a competitive player? And I would argue you at least need to travel 3 times a year to tournaments that are big tournaments. And then how are the main 2 factions of competitive HeroClix going to deal with the qualification method, while balancing inclusivity in terms of getting as many people to play, because more people playing means more money, and also keeping a level of legitimacy. That's what I'm looking at. In particular, as a side note, I'm looking at like Worlds, because if it takes 8 points to get into Worlds, I would be highly ticked. It should be like 16. If I'm bringing over, or if I'm bringing over a qualification for being on the top half of U.S. Nationals, then that should get me into Worlds, or from whatever Nationals that you have. If I'm on the bottom half, then I should go out there and get 8 more points again to sort of prove that, yeah, I belong in the World Championship. But for some person that's just like, yeah, screw US Nats, I'm just going to Worlds, and then they just have to get 8 points, I think that's a little disgraceful. That really does not respect the amount of work that people put in that played in US Nats, and then it doesn't respect the work that people did to like try to perform well at U.S. Nationals for their ranking. So I think that's an issue. And then with Rock, the Rock almost has like the inverse problem, which is you could travel a lot in Rock and not get any points. And so I'm not pro participation points. I'm really not. But I've seen like big tournaments start having less and less people show up, in part because, yeah, WizKids dropped the price of kits and just started giving like LEs out, like con exclusive LEs as prizes. So because of that, I don't know what Rock needs to do to sort of come back, be more competitive. I don't know. I do think there's something that may have to be assessed with qualifications into World Cup. What does that mean? I think there are some things there. But that's something for another time. But definitely looking at it now, we have a realistic problem. And like I said, the realistic problem is how many tournaments, competitive tournaments, can the community handle? And that I don't have a solution to. So, like always, you can follow me on Twitter, at StartOverPod. It came from outer space and told me, man, there's a game called in Dimension 5Z2X on the outskirts of Planet 5239 Zeta. There is a group of people that play a game called Naga Fighters, and the world champion of that is Speed Human, and he won by summoning the great Naga twice. Yeah, it's a little Evo pun, but anyway. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter because that's a better way of knowing when a new show is up than hitting that little like and subscribe button and all the other in the bell. Follow me on Twitter. You'll see whenever a new episode is up. That's way better than anything else. You can also email me at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. That's startingoverpodcast@gmail.com if you wish to opine. Keep it piffy, keep it interesting, keep it awesome, baby. Let me know what you think about this new Batman set, and what do you think about my analysis on Autonomous, and about what what it implies for the game. You can also go to the blog at startingoverpodcast.blogspot.com. There you can donate as you wish to the show. And donating to the show helps pretty much me reinvest into the show, get some things that I want to get done quicker, and stuff like that. And last but not least, you can also click on the link below, and you can get a Starting Over Podcast t-shirt. But that's about it. But before I go, I'd like to give a shout out to a good transaction I had with this cat on eBay. His name is Soaring Pilgrim. SOARING-PILGRIM. And pretty much I bought a Robin chase from him, and it got lost in the mail. And so this guy not only refunded my money, but offered to give me a super rare to just say, like, hey, I'm sorry for the mix-up, and I still want your business. So I thought that was good. I thought that was good, deserving of a shout-out, because, most people don't do that. And, that heroclix game, selling them singles is a tough business, but definitely shout-outs to him. So, like always, I'd like to thank you all for listening, and remember, we all have to start